If this could be okay for the organization, maybe we can start our panel.
Можливо, ми вже можемо розпочати нашу панель.
Так, звісно, можна розпочинати вашу
Yes, of course, we can begin. And we're going to have an interesting focus. Maya is going to share the focus
Maja
with us.
will start.
But I'm going to
I'd like to pass
give all the
on
participants
you
into
to
the
Maja,
reliable Maya's hands.
who
And
represents
she represents
Consent
our project called Consent.
and
she's managing the
she is a
coordination
supporter
of mediation in the sector of justice.
project.
Wonderful presentation. I would like to welcome all the participants, of course, and all the speakers, especially my speakers at today's panel. And really, it's never too much to congratulate for the amazing work that Ukrainian Academy of Mediation is doing. To you, Luisa, and to your team, congratulations. You're doing something very exclusive, something extremely humane at the end of the day and valuable. So please continue with this energy to support the development of alternative dispute resolution through mediation in Ukraine, but also in the world, as we see from today's event. Thank you also for bringing me to this panel. And as part of the team of the EU project Pravo-Justice, I can only confirm what my team leader, Oksana Cimbrivska, said just before. We will definitely continue to support the alternative dispute resolution, including mediation, especially mediation, and the Ukrainian Academy of Mediation that has proven to be the leading organization in this concern. So my task today is to facilitate dialogue as a moderator of the panel, The Road to Understanding, the role of dialogue and mediation in migration crisis. It's an extremely important topic. It's a topic that, especially in today's reality, is emerging more and more. And I have to highlight that migration crisis is a test, not only the test to borders, but test of our values, our systems, and our ability to adapt to the actual crisis. So generally saying, it is the test of our shared humanity. A dialogue and mediation, yes.
Sorry, can we make 1 minute checking, because I can see some messages about the translation.
Of course, you just let me know, no problem.
Okay, thank you, sorry, 1 minute.
1, 2, 3, this is interpretation. Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, interpretation.
Можете продовжувати. Були увімкнені 2 українських канали у перекладачів. Зараз має бути все добре.
Добре, окей. Дякую, Майя, вибачте.
We can continue, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So to conclude this little introduction, it's important to say that the nature of migration has a humanitarian, has a political and a legal, but especially social dimensions. And today our intent is to, through a dialogue with our panelists, to explore how dialogue mechanisms between different stakeholders, states, communities, institutions, physical people can prevent or resolve the conflict during these migration challenges that we are especially facing in Ukraine, but not only. We see it in the different shapes throughout the world. Our speakers today are very valuable, and it's my honor really to be there here with them today. Ms. Alina Arnaut, Ms. Anna Lysko, and our guest of honor, Mr. Mohamed Keshavjee. Correct me, I probably am pronouncing it wrong. I will briefly introduce each speaker before their intervention. And after the initial presentations, we are open, of course, to receive questions. And as a conclusion to our panel today, we will ask our speakers to give their final remarks, recommendations, or conclusions, as you wish. With all that, it is my pleasure finally to give the floor to the real people of today's panel. Miss Alina Arnaut will be our first speaker, and we're very honored to be joined by Alina. She's a deputy project manager at the Civil Society 10th of April, and she brings over 10 years of experience in humanitarian field. This organization is active across 9 regions in Ukraine and has implemented more than 30 projects. And today we'll have the opportunity to hear not only about the scale of the displacement crisis, but also about concrete and practical approaches that have been developed in response. So please, can I invite Ms. Alina to start her presentation? And after that, we can proceed with other questions and speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for presenting me. Now I turn to Ukrainian, and I would like to share my presentation in order to start the panel. Вітаю, мене звати Аліна Арнаут. Представлюся ще раз. Дуже дякую за презентацію.
My name is Alina Arnaut. Thank you very much for my introduction. On my behalf, I'd like to mention that this has been and will be an important challenge for our nation, first of all, because we are in Ukraine right now. And I'm from Odessa. And I really want to emphasize right now the importance of mediation for us as for civil society, first of all, in the context of the migration crisis, in the context of the war that unfortunately we have to confront with. Let me share my presentation, first of all. Can you tell me if you can see my screen? Yeah, we can see it, but it's not full screen.
Так. Отже, я би хотіла розпочати свій виступ в першу чергу.
I would like to begin my intervention, first of all, with making you aware of the 10th of April Civil Society Organization, so that the guests of the forum could see and understand what our organization has been doing and who we work with. So the 10th of April, why we call that way? First of all, this is day of birth of Hugo Grozi, a great thinker, lawyer, philosopher, a father of international law, who for many years had been in exile from his family in the Netherlands, and in his work about the law of war and peace, he insisted in the rights of those seekers, those who had suffered from undeserved violence. So our mission is to continue Hugo Grozi's deeds and provide professional support in restorative justice, restoring the rights, and creating more opportunities. Our organization has been working in Ukraine with IDPs, internally displaced persons, those who suffered from the war, from the refugees and asylum seekers, from other countries as well, who have been provided with asylum or sought asylum here in Ukraine. Also stateless persons and those who are under risk of statelessness. Our team in 2012 was composed of 8 people, but as of the last year, and now we can talk about our staff, we have more than 500 people in our team. Those are professionals who have been working and helping our nation a lot. Like we already discussed today, we have been working in 9 regions of Ukraine. Already 10, I'm sorry, because this is updated information. We run 17 different projects. providing humanitarian assistance, asylum support, emergency response. Over the last year, more than 300,000 people enjoyed our support and assistance from the organization. This is our geographical coverage right now. Mostly this is the south, east, and center of Ukraine. Here you can see, in a nutshell, the international partners that we've been collaborating with here in Ukraine. This is a really strong experience that our organization can be proud of. And we can not only be called the civil society organization, but the national or nationwide civil society organization. Among the areas of our activities, just in a nutshell, one of the key priorities and focuses for us that's been lasting for a long time, this is advocacy, the issues of damaged housing and infrastructure, social support and assistance, gender-based violence, psychological support, children protection, temporary asylum seekers, working with the youth, evacuation, and emergency response mechanisms, under which we try to satisfy almost all the needs of those people in search of solutions to save their lives. What the war has brought and what the challenges we confront with. Since the full-scale invasion, there was just absolutely huge eruption of requests to our organization. First of all, from people seeking information. They had not known where to go to, who can support them. First of all, this was communicating with people who ended up in very difficult life circumstances. We tried to support them from psychological and emotional standpoints. We've been working in evacuation missions during shelling and legal uncertainty situations. Those are the challenges that we've been facing since the outset of the full-scale invasion. Over the last year alone, our organization had helped a great number of people to get various services and assistance. You can see the figures right here on the screen, and there is always a human being behind all those figures, their destinies and their problems. So it's very important. Since we are the leaders, experts, and the first place to call to and go to, we want to make sure we provide qualified support. And in this particular case, the capacity of people, the opportunity for people to be heard and listened to, this gives assuredness and confidence of tomorrow. And this helps a human being to find him or herself in a difficult in a difficult life situation. So we had more than 12,000 requests for legal aid. 185 people were supported in courts to defend their rights. As well, a valuable contribution from our organization was done by providing qualified mental and psychological support, both individually and in groups. But again, we can see huge figures over just last year alone. Almost 20,000 people took part in the group sessions, while individually we had supported 6,700 people. Like I already mentioned, our objective and our mission is not only to build awareness and support people, provide protection, but this is also early response to those challenges that people confront with during the war. Unfortunately, the continuous shelling, it never ends. And things that are happening in those areas where our teams reach out to. This exactly what we do is actually helping people to understand where they can go to, what requests they can submit, so that they're not alone in this situation. There are organizations who are ready to listen and hear, and people have to know that we at least can cover their basic, essential needs after those horrendous cases of shelling, missile attacks that happen on a daily basis in our country. So over the last year, more than 1,000 people received emergency kits so that they can at least provide for their further living in their communities that suffered from shelling. And for this purpose, we've been providing them with building materials in an emergency situation. We not only support families, but also we provide support to administrative buildings that suffered from the shelling and missile attacks. Again, some of the other products that we deliver, like no grocery, because there are a lot of requests for that, for real material. We are trying to resolve those issues through communication, coordination with various partners, donors who support Ukraine continuously. As well, we've been engaging representatives from communities on the ground. We engage them in training, capacity building, and leadership workshops so they can, on their own, support their community dwellers and bring something valuable to the communities so that they can handle their situations and function by themselves. To what's been said before, I think it is very important to underline that we have been supporting families that live in temporary housing premises. Over the last year, we supported 85 different locations. The support has been various. There is a soft component, like we call it, like awareness raising sessions, various psychological support missions, legal advice that gives an opportunity for people to be heard, to get access to information at least. And of course, in this respect and in this dimension, we have been supported very largely by mediation, because there are, unfortunately, conflicts between those dwellers of those temporary housings that, even though had understood that they lost something that they valued, something that they nurtured and cherished in their entire life, and it's very difficult to realize that you lost all that naturally. And of course, in those particular cases, those people are depressed. Most probably they have psycho-emotional disorders, so this is our objective, to try to help those people to be heard, first of all, in those places where they think they cannot be heard whatsoever. But actually, you can see those figures. And we underline this, that in those temporary housing premises, we have around 5,000 people, but these figures vary across the country, and they are much bigger, actually. Whenever we were talking about mediation, in the context of displacement, we have also observed the situation and came to conclusions that indeed conflicts, misunderstandings between IDPs and the hosting communities do happen because of the resources, mainly because of the housing, due to misunderstandings that sometimes happen. There are internal domestic conflicts and family conflicts that are there in the context of displacement. And Whenever they want to apply for any support, we register that. Mediation in this respect helps us reduce the level of conflicts and prevent litigations. When we are able to set the people down at the table of negotiations, first of all, we're open and we support our team members because we encourage them to learn. And first of all, mediation learning has been already covered, has already been passed by the hotline people as well as emergency response officers. So IDPs normally submit their requests on the variety of different matters. We are much more efficient in responding the conflicts, trying to de-escalate them just through simple conversation, because we're trying to listen, we're trying to hear, and that's when de-escalation happens, which helps an individual to be more confident in making decisions for his or her further action. And this gives confidence as well in trying to resolve those issues. Of course, we try to forward those people for mediation in case the case is more difficult than we can handle. From the real practical cases, from our experience, this is something that I mentioned already, we try to handle alimonies and inheritance cases. Our staff has been trained on this. Again, mediation in conflicts between IDPs and local self-government on housing. This is one of the brightest examples, I would say, in the context of displacement, especially in the regions where we operate. And actually, this is true for the rest of Ukraine as well. Again, through our hotline support, we try to mitigate this restraint, and this helps us to be much more efficient in delivering support to the people, or actually trying to forward them to other organizations. Around more than 9,000 people received support and consultation about protection and other information that was necessary. Of course, this figure is much bigger right now, as of today. Oh, wow. But of course, altogether, we have more than 30,000 requests. Our operators have been trained on basic mediation because people normally come with conflicts, and this is their daily job. So we need to make sure that we have competent, empathy-based approach to conflict resolution. So summing up, I could tell that mediation and law, this is the path for conciliation. It helps encourage amicable resolution. It brings back the feeling of protectedness, and we support human dignity in any situation. When somebody is forced to leave his or her home and the country due to the war, the person loses not only the roof above his or her face, but the person loses the ground under his or her feet. This deprives an individual from protection, safety, and confidence. So this is not only about talking, but this is about sought for respect and dignity. And this is where mediation is not just a tool. This is a humane approach. And this is an attempt primarily to try to help the person to feel and see that their opinion matters and they are heard. In the context of displacement, and I want to stress this again, this is about restoring trust, about negotiating in the most baffling conditions, and about recognizing and acknowledging problems and pains of the both parties.
Today, when millions of Ukrainians ended up being IDPs, this is a historic opportunity to make mediation part of our culture in communities, in schools, social services, anywhere really. And our mission is not only to help people solve their problems, but our mission is that every person has the right to be heard and to know where he or she can find help. And 10th of April is at the forefront of these processes. And our goal is to renew people and society. This wraps up my presentation. Thank you for your attention. We welcome cooperation and cross-fertilization.
Thank you very much, Alina. We have some questions, but maybe after our presentations we can come back and I can ask these questions for all our panelists. Very interesting information you provided. Your work, what you have been doing is really admirable, and also how this mediation values and skills actually help you conduct effectively and efficiently very demanding tasks that you've been involved in. That was very interesting points you made there. Our next speaker is Ms. Anna Lysko. She is, just to give a few words of introduction, a director of the Lviv Mediation Center and a managing partner at a law firm, so a lawyer. Also, besides these important functions, she is as well a member of the Public Integrity Council under the High Qualification Commission of Judges of Ukraine. As a mediator, Anna has a really extensive experience in conflict resolution in administrative, civil, and business matters. But since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Ms. Anna was involved in facilitated organization and coordination of projects related to mobile teams in Western Ukraine that actually worked in providing psychological and mediation support to internally displaced persons. So always on this topic and from a valuable Ukrainian experience, please, I would like to invite Ms. Anna Lysko to give us her 15-minute presentation starting from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maja, for kind words. I will switch to Ukrainian now. Доброго дня. Надзвичайна приємність і велика честь бути сьогодні тут.
Hello, this is a great pleasure for me to speak to the audience at the Mediation and Law Forum. Thank you for inviting me. I'd like to share my presentation with you. Just give me a second.
Скажіть, будь ласка, чи видно презентацію?
Can you see my presentation?
Супер, дякую. Отже,
Perfect.
в цілому так тема наша називається
So, it's Road to Understanding and the Role of Dialogue and Mediation During Migration Crises. So that is the topic of my presentation. So I'd like to briefly share our experience, the experience of my team, and how I understand the processes that we were able to successfully implement. And because the topic is Road to Understanding, I tried to show this road visually so that participants could understand that this road is not smooth. Our road looked more like these hills with ups and downs, and it's uneven. And my descent happened for the on the 24th of February 2022, after Russian full-scale invasion started, because despite the horror that we all felt at that time, I had a question for my self-identification, because I felt like everything I did until that point became redundant, because it occurred to me that my mediation skills are no longer needed, because we need to use force. We need guns, we need weapons, we need force. Mediation cannot work, when you are under attack. So that was difficult for me psychologically, because I felt like I was no longer needed on this planet, because I felt helpless. I couldn't help my country. And this lasted for a couple of weeks, because then it occurred to me that, well, after all, there are things I could do. I still could be useful, And that's when we started to help IDPs, because Lviv Center of Mediation were located in Lviv, but we covered the whole of Western Ukraine. And at the time, there was a huge influx of refugees from the east. And when they arrived in Western Ukraine, we created mobile groups comprising mediators, psychologists, to help people where they ended up in shelters, temporary refugee camps, etc. And based on this work, our mobile groups worked in Lviv, Rivne, and Transcarpathian regions. We had 5 teams who traveled to different shelters, and we rendered 4,000 consultations, and we came to the conclusion, in the context of today's presentation, about the role of presentation and the dialogue. And the first conclusion that we came to, what dialogue and mediation can do, is to preserve humaneness amid instability. And mediation, can help us, despite large number of people arriving. Behind these statistical data, we can see a person, an individual, and we understood that that is very important, especially for people who moved. They didn't want to be just a number in a statistical report. They wanted to remain human. And so our teams offered mediation services, psychological counseling, but we understood that it shouldn't be done in this way, because the first thing you need is trust. because right now we have, lawyers, judges, they know a lot about mediation, but rank and file citizens, they mostly never heard of it. Therefore, they don't trust the process, and people in stress become even more careful, especially when they deal with something they are not familiar with. So we decided that we can deal with that later, and during our consulting missions, we understood, for instance, when we would arrive to a shelter, spend there 4 to 6 hours, and when they returned back, I asked them, how many mediations did you do? They say 0. Okay, but what did you do for 4 to 6 hours? And they said, well, we just talked. And as a result of such talking, we came up with a new format of assistance. We called it speech therapy. It's a talk, it's a discussion that help person to lay their difficulties off their chest, so to speak. So when we asked mediation assistance, they said, no, thank you, I don't have any conflicts. But when they started to talk, the person would share their traumatic experience. And we realized that these conversations were actually quite therapeutic in their nature. And that's why our experts spend a long time talking to people like this, and this was one of the unique features of our interaction with people. Next point that nicely outlines the role, and that is preventing social tension. This is important because mediation helps to find common ground instead of differences. Now, how our psyche works, when we see something different, we feel it like something alien, which means my security is under threat. I don't feel safe. And I automatically might come under attack. And that's why we try to show how much in common we have. Because Ukraine is a large country and each region has its own unique features and character. And that's why we tried to find things that we share in common, things we have in common, rather than concentrate on our differences. So what we also learned from our work in shelters, we should help not only people who migrated. We should have received requests from people who received IDPs or from shelter administrations. Therefore, our approach during the first month, second month, it changed so that we can give assistance not only those who lost their house and assets and had to move and relocate, but we also helped recipients of IDPs. For example, a headmaster of the school, without having any skills, would have to manage process of receiving IDPs because often they would end up in school gym, for instance, with cot beds. So we helped those people as well, because they have to deal with 20 to 30 IDPs, trying to solve their problems, make sure they're taken care of. And the way the shelter manager communicates will significantly affect the environment in which these people have to live in. And later on, of course, we had experts who specialized in support to IDPs, because the feedback was both positive as well as negative. So we helped them to sort this out and guided them in this complicated process. The next point is what mediation does. It builds bridges and it fosters integration. We were saying we now have a new reality, and everyone has a place in this reality. So we need to create this new reality where everyone will be comfortable. And so IDPs who needed psychological support were very happy when we conducted meetings outside shelter, because that for them that was an opportunity to go outside, take a walk through the city, and that's why we tried to conduct meetings and these educational events outside shelters. And the last point, which is equally important, is developing your own skills. Because at the beginning, it was like, a loss of identity. Why did I do this all this time? Now I'm no longer needed. But instead, I was able to help many of our colleagues, and we realized that we are not only victims in this conflict, but we are also part of the process of changes, and we can get engaged and help something and improve things for the better. And this helps us morale high.
I want to thank you. I can see my time is already finished. So I thank you very much.
Again, interesting presentation. And if I may say that from both of these first two interventions, we understand how important the mediation is. It is an extremely powerful tool, not only to resolve problems, but to maintain a certain level of humanity. And when the state processes and administration and institutions somehow cannot find any more or cannot adjust to the crisis situation quickly. This is where we have NGOs like yours who are filling in the gap and then actually becoming leaders in facilitating the resolution of the crisis. So once again, congratulations for an amazing work, and I really wish you really the best in your future work. We will have a question later that I will ask to all the panelists, but now we proceed to our third panelist, and it's my really honor to be here to give a few introductory remarks about our dear guest, Mr. Mohamed Keshavjee. Please correct me if I'm probably mispronouncing it. Mohamed is an esteemed lawyer and international specialist in cross-cultural mediation, and his background, his education is very rich already by itself. He has successfully completed his PhD from the London University and withholds several certified training certificates from Harvard Program on Negotiation, Berghof Foundation of Berlin, and among others, Child Focus of Brussels. Mr. Keshavjee focuses very strongly on migration and access to justice. He worked across all the continents, I would say, if not all, most of them, supporting dialogue in culturally diverse and crisis-affected settings. His book, one of his books, Islam, Sharia, and Alternative Dispute Resolution, actually explores how mediation can support displaced and marginalized communities. And he brings to this panel today decades and decades of experience in using dialogue, but not always the same dialogue. Dialogue needs to be adjusted according to the situation from the cultural, linguistic, and sociological aspects as well. And using these dialogues as a tool for dignity and resolution in migration crisis. And it's my true honor again to have you here today. And please take the floor is yours. You have about half an hour for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maja, for that very gracious and generous introduction. Thank you, Luisa, for setting up such a brilliant conference. And thank you, Anna and Anila. I listened very intently to your presentations, which add great support to the hope I wish my particular presentation this morning will engender in the global community about this tremendous power of mediation in dissipating hate, anger, pain, and changing it into constructive energy. So we'll start with my presentation, which is called The Long-Drawn Trauma of Forcibly Displaced People and the Mitigative Effect of Early Mediation. So Maja, could I have my presentation, the slides? Could I have the first slide, please? Yes, can we have the first slide?
Next slide, yes, here we
sure.
are.
That is my presentation, The Long-Drawn Trauma of Forcibly Displaced People. Next slide, please. Have the next slide. Okay, I thought I will give you a scope of my lecture. So within the 35 or 30 minutes, I could cover all the specific aspects, hopefully literally about 7 or 8 minutes on each theme. Firstly, I will try and give a small idea of what forcibly displaced people mean in the context of our lecture this morning. Secondly, I'd like to give you an idea of my own personal experience. I was displaced not once in life, but 3 times, and yet I didn't fit into any of the categories of the definitions that were more legalistic. Thirdly, I would like to talk about mediation and why. Why do I feel mediation has that such tremendous power? And lastly, I'd like to just leave you with some thoughts ahead, the road ahead, so that we can ignite this spirit of hope and determination, to use the phrase of the late Aga Khan when he spoke of human development. Next slide, please. Categorization. What do we mean by forcibly displaced persons? These are people who are forced to move within or across borders due to armed conflict, persecution, terrorism, human rights violations and abuses, violence, the adverse effects of climate change, natural disasters, development projects, or a combination of all of these factors. So from what we heard from Anila and from Anna shows there could be many, many factors why people move. Next slide, please. The categorization, very briefly, is in the following. Refugees are those who are forced to flee their homes because of war, violence, or persecution, often without warning, and who have rights to specific protections under international law once they obtain their refugee status. Then you have asylum seekers, those who are seeking international protection from dangers in their own country, but whose claim for refugee status has not yet been determined. Then there's a category I just learned of recently, Venezuelans displaced abroad, those of Venezuelan origin who are likely to be in need of international protection under the Cartagena Declaration, but who have not applied for asylum in the country in which they are present. And this particular declaration of 1984 broadens the scope beyond the 1951 Refugee Commission. And then, of course, internally displaced people, IDPs, those who have been forced to flee their homes because of war, violence, human rights violations, or disasters, to remain in their own country. Remember this, they remain in their own country. Next slide, please. In November 2021, the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UN High Commission for Refugees, published its mid-year trends report. It is estimated that the number of people forcibly displaced globally exceeded 84 million. 84 million people were forcibly displaced, according to the UNHCR report in 2021. Next slide, please. James Cleverly, Minister for the Middle East and North Africa, and Ambassador James Kariuki, Deputy Permanent Representative of the UK mission to the United Nations in New York, outlined some of the UK's funding for displaced people. And this is what Cleverly said. It's the nightmare combination of conflict, COVID-19, and the climate crisis means the number of people forced from their homes is set to pass 100 million next year. And this is from the UK Parliament House of Lords Library of Thursday, 21st December 2021. Can we go to the next slide, please? When you look at the refugees under the UNHCR mandate at the end of 2020, it surpassed 20.8 million people. More than half of those were granted international protection, and they were from countries like the Central African Republic, South Sudan, Syria, Afghanistan, Nigeria. In addition, there were 92,100 newly displaced Venezuelans in Latin America and the Caribbean. Next slide, please. The 5 countries hosting the most refugees were Turkey, Colombia, Uganda, Pakistan, and Germany. So as you can see, 2 of those countries, actually one is in Asia, one's in Africa, one's in Latin America, one's in Europe, and one's in Turkey. So you can see which are the 5 countries hosting most of the refugees. And these figures do not take into account the natural disasters in the Sahel region or the present wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, I wanted to give you my own example because this is why I'm so passionate about mediation, because I've lived this life over the last 50 years. Interestingly enough, I didn't come into any of the above categories, but found myself displaced 3 times in my life and helped as a lawyer in the Uganda expulsion of 1972 and in subsequent resettlement processes. That means I worked in 3 countries during those years. I worked in Kenya as a lawyer, but I was a displaced South African. In a way, I was a displaced person. I was not within the country where I was born. Then I came to UK as a person from a country that had left the Commonwealth, so I didn't have any particular immigration rights. And then I was in Canada, initially as a student, but I was a lawyer who didn't have the right to practice initially. So I was a South African Indian who was displaced, but working with the problems of displaced people globally. Next slide, please. This is the experience I wanted to mention. My childhood was in South Africa, where I was born. And just to give you a small picture, that between 1948 and 1994, the South African government at that time passed 148 laws between these years to curtail the freedom of people on the basis of the color of their skin. So you could see these slides here, that as a non-white of Indian origin, born in South Africa, I could not sit on a chair in town. I couldn't use a library. I couldn't go to a swimming pool. We had no health services. We had very restricted services in hospitals. These were the real life situations we faced. Next slide, please. In 1961, my parents took me and 11 of my siblings to settle in Kenya. So we were leaving a country where we had no rights by virtue of the color of our skin, arriving in a country where Jomo Kenyatta had just been released in Kenya from 9 years in a prison. So we were living in a country where they were hounding a person who 35 years later was going to become a president, arriving in a country where a person was just coming out of prison to become a president of a country. The country, Kenya, at the time was undergoing a massive transformation. Many expatriates were leaving. The Indian minority was unsure of its own future. So there were white expatriates leaving Kenya. There was an Indian minority that was living in Kenya for a few generations, were unsure of its future. South Africa, of which I was a national, was entering itself in a renewed struggle that was going to continue for another 30 years. And Nelson Mandela, as I mentioned to you, was being hounded by the security police. So you could see that we were in between 2 massive transitions in Africa during the decolonization process in Africa, called, in Harold Macmillan's beautiful phrase, the wind of change. Can we have the next slide, please? The Asian minority in East Africa, we as displaced family were part of 360,000 Asian minority in 4 East African countries: Kenya, Uganda, Tanganyika, as it was called then, and Zanzibar. The East African governments were bent on Africanization and made it abundantly clear that they were on a path of reconstructing society for a post-colonial world. And I can understand that sentiment. I'm not here to speak judgmentally on what happens politically, but I'm talking about my experience as part of that minority. The United Kingdom government passed legislation to curtail immigration from East Africa and in effect devalued the British passports that East African Asians possessed. So they could not come automatically into Britain. The Indian government felt that Asians from East Africa or from Africa were part of the countries to which their ancestors had moved over a century ago, and their destiny was with the African countries. And I think that was the policy India had with the diasporic minorities across the world. Next slide, please. So what was the reality on the ground? The Asians of East Africa were precariously perched. It shouldn't be purged. It's not a Freudian slip, but it's perched, P-E-R-C-H-E-D, on a fault line of history created by European colonialism. And in the words of a very leading political scientist, Yash Tandon, he said they were stepchildren of the colonial empire. Let us see. Next slide, please. My own experience of settling in. While there was great euphoria in the post-colonial hope, and I was part of that hope. I came as a young boy. I came with 11 siblings. We were full of excitement, full of joy, full of hope. But there were moments of sadness. And this is something I recall very deeply. I do recall when I was on a bus in Nairobi, listening to a beautiful tune by the iconic Indian singer Lata Mangeshkar from a film called Avara, which was a globally known Indian movie of 1951, starring the great Indian movie icons Raj Kapoor and Nargis. It was poignant as it mentioned in a song, the night was changing and a new order was on the horizon. I realized that the Indian memory of Kenya was being suppressed on the altar of a new narrative in the making. I could feel a piece of me dying as I was hearing that song, as I was in the throes of recapturing my own cultural identity. Looking back, even today, 50 years later, when I hear that song, I feel a tinge of deep sadness. Next slide, please. Come 1972, enter Idi Amin of Uganda and the expulsion of 80,000 people in 90 days. On 4th August 1972, Idi Amin passed an edict giving the Indians 90 days to leave the country. There was monumental chaos as people scuttled around the country in utter desperation, looking for a place that would give them refuge and sanctuary. Here I would like to relate again a personal experience, that while we ourselves were internally displaced, a Black African former Attorney General of Uganda, a very close family friend, turned up at our home at 6 o'clock in the morning. He had walked across the border. He wanted to know where his family was. Our family had received his family a day earlier, and we had got them to hide in a place near our home. My mother received him at 6 in the morning. Here was a former Attorney General of a country, beautifully attired, a man who was one of the most educated people I met in my life, walking with a cap and a tracksuit. He said, I left my Mercedes-Benz car in front of my house in Kampala, and I left walking, and I walked the border. It is ironic that here was an displaced family giving refuge to a former Attorney General of a nearby country. But I have other experiences at that time. I was a practicing lawyer in Nairobi at that time. On one morning, 2 young kids came to my office. One was going to Canada, the other one was going to England. And they were buddies. And this one boy told his friend, hey, why don't you come with me? I'm going to Canada. And the other one said, no, but I've got a ticket already for England. So somebody told them to come to my office. And when I saw this one boy, he said, I bought this ticket. I'm going to lose my money. Luckily, I was a lawyer to the travel agent. So I phoned up the travel agent owner, a very wonderful humanitarian individual. I told him the problem. He said, send the little boy to me and I'll just endorse his ticket and he can change it to Canada. It was that little quirk on a Saturday morning that changed the destiny of two little boys who eventually set up a car washing company in Canada. And I never saw them again, but I believe that they became quite successful in what they were doing. But there's a third particular example I wish to cite, and that was the one of a friend of mine who had qualified in Kenya as an engineer. And he was on a scholarship from the Ugandan government. When he was going back, at that time, the Ugandan immigration canceled his passport. And so he didn't know where to go. He was on the line waiting to go to Canada, which was a very, very, very long line. And a friend of his, he tapped him on the back and said, hey, why don't you get on the other line? That's the Australian line. They open half an hour early. So he told his girlfriend to wait in the line of Canada, and he went across the road to the line of Australia. And when the Australian people said, we can give you a visa, he said, I'll go home and ask my father. They looked out of the window and they said, you see that line? Canada is taking a lot more people. We are only going to take a handful. If you don't make a decision immediately, you ain't going. So he said, what about my girlfriend? He said, oh, we don't take girlfriends. We only take wives. So he said, what do I do? She's my girlfriend. We're going to get married. So the officer there told him, why don't you go across the road, get an affidavit that you're getting married or you got married and come back. He came back, they stamped his passport, and eventually he ended up in Australia. His brother, who did not get onto the queue, ended up in Canada, and the third brother ended up in England. But that is the nature of movement and migration. Must say that comes to good wishes to Edward Heath for a moral commitment, because he said Britain has to take these people in. And in 6 weeks, 28,606 displaced Asian British citizens arrived in Britain. Their settlement odyssey started. Canada took over 6,000 people. And here I must quote Pierre Trudeau, who said very beautifully at the time that Canada will try and give these people an honorable place in Canadian society. Sadly, as a footnote, I need to mention that about 500,000 indigenous Africans in Uganda lost their lives over the next 9 years. This is a human issue, as both Anna and Anila mentioned, the pain between the victim and the victimized, between the receiver and the receiving. So that is a background of my own life. Next slide, please. The reality of arrival, the struggle for acceptance, the quest for identity, and the need for belonging. The euphoria of escaping danger can be overpowering, but the reality of being accepted and belonging can be a real daunting and ongoing experience. The host country can be inviting at first, but over time it can become compassion fatigued unless displaced people fend for themselves and find their way around. Right-wing populist movements can be problematic, as was the case in the UK with the National Front and subsequently with the BNP. Many Asians who came from Uganda were victims of racism, but equally, there were many civil society institutions and individuals that showed kindness and compassion to help the displaced Asians make a new home for themselves in the United Kingdom. Canada itself proved adept at accommodation and gave the 6,000 Ugandan Asians who they accepted a chance to make a new home in the country. But this too was not an easy journey. In this context, I had the good opportunity to interview a lady who was from my own law school, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind my mentioning her name, Senator Mubina Jaffer, who had to struggle gender prejudices, who had to struggle professional prejudices, requalified as a lawyer. I think she was the first East Asian woman to become a senator in the Canadian government, and eventually she was working on the South Sudan refugee crisis. I can cite so many examples of people who came as refugees, but created an opportunity and were able to come out of the grievance rhetoric, moving towards constructive energy. The next slide, please. Here, I will try and just go through quickly the type of things we face. And I can give an example for every one of these, but I'm sure with these 13 I have, you could add another 20. The loss of identity. Identity loss and identity creation is a constant work in process. And here we could write books about it. I mean, there's so much written on that. In the Indian diaspora, you have a person like V.S. Naipaul, but you have so many people who have written on this issue from all cultural contexts. The question of need to requalify in order to assert one's professional qualification. It's a deep, painful issue. I had to qualify as a lawyer 3 times in my life, and yet I did not have the opportunity to practice immigrationally. Clash of cultures, relational versus individualistic. Loss of indigenous network support. Internal trauma due to fear of one's family back home, and general insecurity of status, mainly in the host countries. But this could differ from country to country, from people to people. The need for belonging, which becomes very critical at moments of rites of passage, birth, marriage, death, illness, emotional and psychosocial transitions. The yearning for one's own food, the quest for the smell of familiarity, the need to link to a perceived past rather than an elusive future. When I qualified as a lawyer, I wanted to join the International Civil Service. A former president of the UN, who was a very close friend of mine with whom I studied, Alex Saki, used a beautiful phrase. He says, Mohammed, go back to Africa, smell the soil of Africa, let it percolate your pores, because then you will understand the human dynamics of belonging and living. There's the need for spiritual nourishment through one's faith and a structured adherence to it. If one has no faith, there are values, humanistic values, that people wish to clutch to at the time of meaning. Gender issues and how do these play out in new settings. The pain of not being heard or listened to. I think both Anna and Anila mentioned what power there is in the listening process. The growing intergenerational chasm due to the differential acculturation of children growing up in a new milieu and parents guarding old world values, all this in the face of exponential technological growth, social media, artificial intelligence, and a growing dystopic world marked by violence, pain, and conflict. And then the question, the myth of return. Do we ever return? What do we return to? Is tomorrow a new country? What does it look like? Remember Chopin when he left Poland, left and took some soil of his native ground to bring to France. So people want to smell the soil of familiarity. They want to embed themselves in that beautiful memory. Let me come to the last part of my lecture, hoping I can finish this in the next 8 minutes. Can I have the next slide, please? What do I see as the hope of which we heard a bit this morning? Mediation as the pathway embodying a limitless remedial imagination. Mediation can be transformative, but it has to be present from the beginning in order to provide the necessary hope that it will be able to provide empowerment and recognition. These are principles from transformative mediation from the famous work by Baruch Bush and Joe Fulger called The Promise of Mediation. Introducing it in refugee camps and in forcibly displaced settings where displaced people interact is critical. We need to introduce it when people arrive, not when they've accultured 10 years later, because that trauma then becomes intergenerational. It doesn't leave people. Capturing people's stories at the earliest so that they feel they belong. Listening to the elders of societies who gave up so much to help their children achieve a better future. Active listening skills, which lie at the heart of mediation, I feel could be the pathway to greater humanization as the world moves through multiple dystopias. And this is doable. We don't need rocket science to do this. It is doable. I harbor the hope, and I have 12 people across the globe who have agreed to give their time pro bono for a program which would be beautifully conceptualized, building both theory and practice, and bringing in all the beautiful stories we heard this morning to be able to help people on the basis of a shared humanity. Because children are children in any context, of any color. As there's an old saying, my blood is not redder than yours. We are all human. When one is pained, everyone is pained. That's a notion of interrelationality that informs our life. I will mention one thing I think that, Anna, you may have mentioned, but I don't know whether your colleague also mentioned. It's from my book called The Triangle of Trust. It's a beautiful triangle of trust by Gadlin and Davis from their paper, Mediation Gains Trust, the Old-Fashioned Way. That they say that within the first 4 minutes, trust is engendered. Trust in oneself, trust in the process, trust in the mediator, trust in society. And if those points of trust are not engendered within the first 4 minutes, we have lost it. I am well in time. I will close now with a quotation by a very leading poet who played a role in the formation of UNESCO. Could we have the last slide, please?
Next slide, please, maybe.
My last slide, I will quote the great American humanist and poet Archibald MacLeish, whose words are featured in the UNESCO Constitution. Since wars begin in the minds of man, it is in the minds of man that the defenses of peace must be constructed. This quote emphasizes the idea that lasting peace requires addressing the root causes of conflict, which are often found within human thought and attitudes. The quote is a core principle of UNESCO and highlights the organization's focus on education, science, and culture as essential tools for building a peaceful world. It suggests that while military and political solutions might address immediate conflicts, true and lasting peace can only be achieved by greater understanding, cooperation, and respect among individuals, institutions, and nations. Let us contribute towards the rehumanizing of humanity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was an extremely inspiring lecture, and I will give also a short personal note. When a personal experience takes and merges with professional experience, we have something very, very valuable. And that's what we heard today from all three of our speakers. And it's just the case that I have, as a 10-year-old girl, been caught up in the middle of a war and went through very big trauma that took me a while to resolve. And today, when I'm listening to the experience and to what has been achieved in the past 30 years since the beginning of the war that caught my country, I see a huge advancement. We didn't have so much or at all support of humanitarians, and mediation was just something very far away. So I will, with full my greater, my professional capacity and private capacity, always support organizations that are tackling with these crises, that are providing human but yet professional mediation help, and that uses the dialogues and different skills to help vulnerable people so that they don't go through even worse than what it really is. So to conclude, I have a question that I would just like to ask maybe one of our three speakers who would like to answer to this, but also to give a final statement as a conclusion to our panel today. So the question is very specific, but I find it interesting. So maybe one of our speakers can answer to it. How can an internally displaced person from Donetsk Oblast, for example, who have been left homeless and whose cities have been completely destroyed, such as Bakhmut, Mariupol, etc., be heard by the Ukrainian authorities so that the state programs are also implemented in their cases, in their areas? It seems that no state programs, such as the e-recovery program, is being implemented in these cities. And the question is, can this be solved or discussed? What is your opinion on this matter? Is there somebody from my panel that would like to answer to this now, or maybe we can provide the answers later in a written form? That's also a possibility. Alina, thank you.
Так, дійсно, ми з таким зіштовхуємося і зараз
Indeed,
є такі питання, є така проблема.
there is an issue here, indeed. What we do right now is, through advocacy, we support IDPs in their desire
В їх бажанні бути почутими в першу чергу і
to be heard
забезпечити їхнє гідне право на проживання далі.
and to ensure their
Комплексний такий підхід.
peaceful stay and comfortable stay in Ukraine. Here we use comprehensive approach using, among other things, mediation, so that both the government and IDPs can hear each other. We can bring them together, round table discussions, for example. And we have successful mediation cases, and perhaps right now we don't have a final decision, but we've seen some progress, and these two mechanisms together work quite well, and hopefully they will help us to solve this problem in the near future in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina. Thank you very much. Indeed, I would say that this answer gives the clearest perspective that we can have at this moment. Mohamed, please, I see you raised your hand as well.
Yes, thank you, Maja. I think that's such a fundamental question. And thank you, Alina. Alina, I may have mispronounced your name and call you Anila, because that's an Indian name, but please forgive me. Maja, what I think we did in the mediation programs we did all over the world, and we did it in Afghanistan, we did it in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Uganda, is I think that if we had a mediation program in the future, a small training program, to bring in some government people to participate in the program, because then they begin to see the meaning of mediation. Until then, mediation should not be only things that we should wait for them to say we'll do it. I think it would be wonderful for them to see the value of mediation so that they then imbibe the principles. And we found that when we did it in different countries, we invited lawyers, we invited judges, we invited elders, we invited people from the schools, and everybody said, wow, this is magical. We can all use this. So I would make the humble submission that in your training programs, even in your basic training programs, bring people from the police force, bring people from the schools, bring people from the shelter homes. If you can give them 4 or 5 places, let them see how the process works. So you are not begging for mediation. They themselves turn up and say, hey, we want to use this. It's a tool.
Very good point you're making. And I'm sure that today there will be a lot of ideas how to actually proceed with this. So for a conclusion, can I invite my 3 valuable and amazing speakers to give one, I would say last words, but last thoughts and recommendations or conclusions in just 1 or 2 sentences. Thank you. Maybe we can start with Alina and Anya.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Did you, yeah, who's starting? Somebody'd like to start?
Добре,
Yeah,
давайте.
with Anna.
Okay, let me do it.
Alina, please take the floor. No problem, yeah.
Thank you very much. Дійсно, для себе знайшла.
Indeed, I found for myself, a lot of interesting information and definitions, and I absolutely agree with you. And let me voice some of my ideas. The right gives the framework, but mediation puts the sense behind those ideas.
Short and clear. Thank you so much. Anna?
Щиро дякую за цю
I
цікаву.
want to thank you for this wonderful discussion that we have. Actually, Mohamed mentioned the idea during his intervention, which I was thinking about, and I put it down for myself again. To me, this is about trusting yourself, trusting mediation, and trusting this process, and keep going forward in full accordance with your inner and intrinsic feeling. And then actually everything is going to work, including in such situations when, from the first glance, mediation may not seem to be something really tangible and possible, but actually it works. It always has its place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mohamed, before you say your last words, there is
Yes, sure.
an extra question for you. Do you recommend having mediators in the consular level of every embassy of the country? What are the other recommendations you may address the needs of immigrants through mediations?
Okay, to answer your
considering
question,
the diplomacy, yes. And then
Yeah.
for last, you can give your last remark
No,
as well. Thank you.
I think all these ideas are very, very vital, very valuable. The practicality is an issue. You know, people will say in foreign offices, well, how much training do we have? How much money do we have to give the training? How much time do they have? All these sort of difficulties come up. But I think the idea is brilliant, that if the foreign ministries of countries could say, because our embassies deal with these type of issues, it could be part of our training. It could be part of our diplomatic training. If they were, I think countries would be warm towards that principle if we did not ask for extra budgetary amounts or so. So this is where my final piece comes in, that my dream would be that an international group of people who want to be inspired by what we spoke of this morning would say, look, we will give a week of our life as mediators to train somebody, either in Sudan or Kenya, Ukraine, or the Middle East or Afghanistan or wherever. So we create that spirit of training people. It doesn't have to be absolutely top quality training. It has to be good basic training. And I think that if that could ever become a reality, there are a lot of people I meet who are very willing to give their time, even if it's 1 week a year. You know, we can get people like L.B. Sachs of South Africa to talk about the power of forgiveness. People like Mahatma Gandhi's granddaughter, Ella Gandhi, I went to visit her. And she said, this is wonderful. She told me what she's doing with people who go through internal displacement. There are voices that we can bring into this program to teach and to inspire. So I would like to just leave people with a dream. I have that dream. It's my dream, but I think it's possible.
Thank you very much. I agree with you. I think it's possible. As you said earlier, it's doable. Well, we must show the world, we must include them, and we don't always have to have the highest quality of products, but sometimes a basic training can switch something in people's brain, and this could be a game changer. Thank you very much, Alina. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Mohamed. Thank you, Luisa, for letting me moderate this amazing panel. And I really wish you all the best in your work, because better you do the work, better humanity will be. Thank you very much for the attention for this panel, and good luck. Thank you.
Я хочу теж подякувати щиро всім
I would also
спікерам.
like to express my sincere gratitude to all the speakers, to Alina, Anna, and you, Mohamed, for bringing in a bit of your own experience of being displaced and working with the displaced people. Right now, we are announcing a break until 15:30, which is Ukrainian time. After 3:30 p.m., we're going to be talking about statistical data collection. And we're going to be talking as well about successful mediation. We're going to discuss mediation in the arbitration ecosystem, and we're going to have 2 more master classes. One is related to managing polarities in mediation, and another one is about mentoring our beginners. That's going to be introduced by our Greek colleague. So now we are announcing a break, which is going to take place for 1.5 hours. So in the chat, you can see the global watch so that you can control your time. Thank you. We'll be happy to see you back.